In this video, we'll be tackling the quote-unquote pregnant person fallacy. I found this article by Googling silencing women, and it falls under the silencing tactics category on geekfeminism.wiki. The pregnant person fallacy is a fallacious argument that discriminating against some property that an oppressed group holds disproportionately is not discrimination against that group. That argument is not fallacious. For example, take discrimination against pregnant people, against short people, against people who are not at the top level of athletic performance or of strength, against people who wear skirts, or against people who took time out of their career to raise children. Despite the fact that not all women and some men and non-binary people are affected by each of these discriminations due to their disproportionate impact on women, these examples likely are discrimination against women, in some cases in combination with discrimination against other oppressed groups. Notice how they included the word likely? Even they know that these things aren't the same thing. Here's a logic bomb for you feminists. Just because something is likely doesn't mean it is the case. Arguing that none of these examples is discrimination against women, because nothing can be discrimination against women unless it is against every woman and no other person, is the definition of the pregnant person fallacy. Background. In The Mismeasure of Women, Carol Tavris wrote about arguments that discrimination against pregnant women is not sexist. She cited examples of arguments that such rules don't discriminate against women and thus aren't sexist. No, these arguments go. They just discriminate against pregnant people. While the claim that these policies are discrimination against pregnant people is slightly misleading, it is miles more correct than claiming that they are discriminatory against women. The set of people who are being discriminated against is just a closer fit to pregnant people. If you were to follow the principle of the least general generalization, you would come to the conclusion that these policies are discrimination against pregnant women. I'm sorry, guys. This paragraph was too poorly written for me to parse. And it's not just the horrible grammar. I mean, they didn't even put an apostrophe in won't. It sucks, because this is the most important part of their article. If I had to guess, it seems they're saying that sexism would influence any policies and legislation affecting the people who hold the property. If that is what they're saying, then they're just presupposing that the sexism exists there. In general, then, one silencing tactic for discussions about sexism is, but food doesn't discriminate against women. It only discriminates against people who have property bar. That's not a silencing tactic, that's a counter-argument. If it so happens that, for example, 50% of women have property bar, while only 0.05% of men do. I'm so glad you felt the need to say, for example, there. I would have come away from the article thinking that you actually believe that 50% of women have property bar. The person doing the silencing deems this disparity an irrelevant matter of statistics, rather than evidence that sexism may be involved in foo. In reality, bar may well be a proxy for gender that people holding power use to discriminate against women tacitly, while easily dodging accusations of sexism, and the adoption of this proxy may be unintentional or intentional. I agree that it could be an intentional or unintentional adoption of a proxy. For me, the key word there is could. The way the argument above was phrased, it seems like it was in response to someone claiming that it was sexism. And, if that is the case, the statement carries an implied necessarily with it. Examples. It's common for white Americans to declare that there is no racism in America, and that there is only classism. This argument is an example of the pregnant person fallacy, because it reflects willful ignorance of racial disparities in socioeconomic status. It's not common for anyone to declare that there is no racism in America. I hear people say there is no institutional racism, or that most people aren't racist, but those are completely different claims. However, your response leads me to believe that you think all classism is a form of racism. That's completely fucking retarded. You won't fix classism by convincing people to treat people of all races the same, so calling it racism is a complete misdirection. Also, you need to listen to your earlier self. Remember when you said, the person doing the silencing deems this disparity an irrelevant matter of statistics, rather than evidence that sexism may be involved? I do, but you expect me to believe that suddenly this is a willful ignorance of statistics? Someone who points out that the blackboards in a math or science building are placed at an ideal height for an average-sized adult man, reflecting architectural sexism that embodies the assumption that a math or science instructor will be a cissexual man, may be silenced with the rejoinder, but it discriminates against short men too. That is a stupid rebuttal. Here's a better one. You can only place a blackboard at an ideal height for one size. Because we're talking about a building dedicated to math or science, I'm assuming this is at a university. The majority of math or science teachers at a university level are going to be men. Thus, placing the blackboard at the height which is closest to ideal for the most amount of people will result in a height which is similar to the ideal for the average-sized adult man. Even if you decided to still count this as sexism, it would be a meaningless distinction that would make a form of legitimate discrimination seem illegitimate via obfuscation. In the US, the state of Texas has a different age of consent for sex between two people of the same sex and two people of a different sex, with a higher age of consent for sex perceived as same sex. Claiming that this disparity was due to antipathy towards anal sex rather than antipathy towards gay men, lesbians, and bisexuals would be an example of the pregnant person fallacy, since antipathy towards certain sex acts is linked with homophobia. First of all, claiming it is due to hatred of butt sex would be retarded, because men and women can fuck in the ass. More importantly, this has to be the worst example you could have possibly picked. This is something which is actually discriminatory against gay people. So when someone comes along and essentially says, this is actually anti-butt sex because it disproportionately affects ass fuckers, you rightfully tell them to fuck off, because it actually affects gay people. Oh, and just to play devil's advocate, a better argument for this law would be that the moral maturity required to engage in gay sex must be higher because the social cost of having gay sex is higher on average due to homophobia. During the controversy over sexual imagery in the CouchDB talk at the 2009 Golden Gate Ruby conference, a common response to the assertion made by women and allies that such imagery creates a hostile environment for women was, "It's not about women. The talk was offensive to anyone with good taste." While men may indeed be uncomfortable with or offended by sexual imagery in a professional context, to deny that the talk created an environment that was especially hostile to women is to deny that a greater percentage of women than of men associate the presence of unwelcome sexual images with a threat to their physical safety. Well, I do deny that anyone views unwelcome sexual images as a threat to their physical safety. However, even if I accepted your premise, that still wouldn't be sexism, because you haven't provided a reason for why this is a fallacy yet. Alright, and that's everything this article has to offer. So, if you disagree with me on anything, leave a comment. If you got anything you'd like me to do a response to, you can link that to me. And I hope you have a nice day.